Hello viewers and welcome to my 10 worst videos of 2018. I actually intended to make this video while we were still in 2018 and here we are now in early January 2019, but what the heck, better late than never. Just before I get started, I do want to say that it was quite challenging drawing up this list. There was a lot of material to choose from, but I do feel fairly comfortable with the selection I'm about to show you. I was quite tough on myself in only choosing from video material with a copyright date of 2018. And this meant that there were certain videos that only came to our attention in 2018, despite having been produced earlier, that I couldn't include in my top 10. But there was one particular video that I felt deserved an honourable or maybe dishonourable mention.
Some outfits are designed to feminize a man's appearance, as homosexuals try to do, especially displaying the buttocks and genitals. Say a brother wears an undergarment that's so tight it rubs his penis as he moves around. He gets aroused and even ejaculates. Suppose a brother starts rubbing his genitals against a pillow. He gets an erection, but stops before having an orgasm. How about having an emission of semen at night, maybe even after an erotic dream? Masturbation contaminates a man with selfishness, it weakens his self-control, and it makes him believe that sex doesn't have to be related to love. Two brothers masturbate in front of each other, but without touching each other. Is it pornea? The answer is no, since neither is touching the other person.
So yes, that was one of two videos that came to be known as Pillowgate that we only found out about at the beginning of 2018, even though it was produced in 2017. But this was a leaked video. It was intended only for Bethelites who were being inducted into the Watchtower facilities. And I've said so much on it already. If you've been living under a rock for the last 12 months or so, please check out Pillowgate. If you just search Pillowgate on YouTube, you should come up with my rebuttal and the trailer I did for the videos. But what more needs to be said? This was outrageous material that perfectly highlighted the regime of sexual repression that all Jehovah's Witnesses live with, not just Bethelites. Anyway, without further ado, it's time to get into my top 10, and we'll start proceedings with a cartoon.
So you are excited to go out in service. Do you think you are ready? Not so fast. Before you go in the ministry, there's a few things we need to go over. First, we must learn the 3 P's.
The 3 P's?
Yes, preparation, personal appearance, and proper behavior. First, preparation. Preparation is the first pillar of success in the ministry. Every job requires the proper tools. When it comes to tools for preaching, the variety might seem intimidating, but never fear. We have the teaching toolbox. Finding the right tools is easier than ever. Once you have your tools, make sure and practice your presentation before you leave the house.
So yes, what you've just seen is the very latest in the Become Jehovah's Friend cartoon series. This particular cartoon I found quite disturbing because it really showcases the way that young Jehovah's Witnesses or Jehovah's Witness children don't really get to have a proper childhood. They are pushed into promoting Watchtower and working as a publicity agent for Watchtower before they even really know what their own beliefs are. Throughout its history, Watchtower has criticised the likes of the Catholic Church for indulging in child baptism, and yet quite clearly from this video, children are being employed as publicity agents, even though it's impossible really for a young child to really know what their beliefs are or what their beliefs will be as an adult. They should be able to just enjoy childhood and enjoy growing up and learning about life and learning about themselves. But that's not how it works when you're raised in the Jehovah's Witness faith. You're immediately pushed into this environment of telling total strangers on their doorsteps what it is that they ought to believe. And rather than being ashamed of pressuring children in this way, Watchtower is apparently quite proud of their strategy.
Why can't I have a husband who loves Jehovah like I do? Abigail probably felt the same way, but with more reason. Her husband was a bully and a drunkard, and was despised by his entire household. At that time, many marriages were arranged, so Abigail had very little control over her circumstances. But her words and actions showed that she was a spiritual woman who didn't focus on what she could not control, but what she could. I determined to do the same. I meditated on Jesus' words at Matthew chapter 19, verse 6. What God has yoked together, let no man put apart.
So on the surface, this may not seem like such a shocking video. We have here a video promoting marriage as a permanent bond. If you're a Jehovah's Witness watching this, you could well argue, well, of course marriage is supposed to be permanent. If marriage is just a temporary thing, what's the point of getting married to begin with? There needs to be some kind of permanence to marriage. But the reason why I've included this video is because it sets a very dangerous precedent. It says if you are in a relationship with someone who is abusive, you need to stay with them regardless. Now, there's been even more disgraceful material along these lines produced by Watchtower that goes even further. For example, the December 2018 Watchtower overtly encourages abused women to endure violently abusive husbands. So this video material doesn't go quite that far. If it did, frankly, it would be higher up in my list. But you have to kind of read between the lines. And there's one interesting part in the clip that I've just shown you where the narrator is talking about the Bible character Abigail and saying that back in those days, back in Bible times, Abigail's marriage to her abusive husband Nabal would have been arranged, and the comment is made, so she didn't have that much control over her situation. The implication being that if you're not in an arranged marriage, if you end up married to a husband that you chose who later ends up being abusive or violent, then you're in control of that. That's your fault by implication. And again, that amounts to victim blaming. That's some very toxic reasoning to be laying on women. And so that's why I've included it in my 10 worst videos of 2018. But I just did want to also mention another video in this same series with the same characters that deals with abortion.
Unfortunately, our hopes were completely destroyed when the doctor told us that the baby would likely be born with severe problems and could even die. I showed Thomas the scripture I had found. If men should struggle with each other and they hurt a pregnant woman, if a fatality does occur, then you must give life for life. Jehovah views even the unintentional killing of an unborn child as a serious sin, So how could we intentionally take the life of our child? I made my decision clear to our doctor.
So I realise that many of you watching this may have some quite strong feelings about abortion. My own view is that women should be in control of whether they abort a pregnancy or not. I think it's very dangerous for that decision to be taken out of their hands, particularly through legislation, when there are so many factors or variables to consider, including the health of the woman and the fact that it's the woman who has to live with the consequences if the child is born. So I think that this is an area in which there needs to be a lot of sensitivity and understanding, and what this video that we've just seen represents is a complete lack of sensitivity and understanding. It's telling Jehovah's Witness women that there's never an excuse to have an abortion, and perhaps more chillingly, it's telling Jehovah's Witnesses in general that they should ignore the advice of a doctor if the doctor's advice contradicts what their religion is telling them, which has all sorts of implications, of course, when it comes to blood transfusions. So that's why I felt this video was worthy of a mention in my worst 10 of 2018. But we must move on because it's time for another cartoon.
From the beginning, Jehovah has always cared about people. Sadly, many of them have caused him great pain. But some have made him very happy.
Go away, Satan. For it is written, "It is Jehovah your God you must worship, and it is to him alone you must render sacred service."
Jesus was determined to make Jehovah happy. But this story isn't over. This is your story too.
What do you mean, Dad?
Well, what you do can make Jehovah happy. Our text this morning, Proverbs 27:11. Do you remember what that says?
Oh yeah, it says, "Be wise, my son, and make my heart rejoice."
Good memory, Sophia. That scripture is talking about you. What you do every day, not only big things, but also small things you do, can make his heart rejoice.
Now, Sophia, if you ace this test, you'll be #1 in the whole class.
Hey, Sophia, I want the answer. You too can have success.
So I never actually got round to doing a rebuttal to this particular cartoon, but when reviewing the footage for this compilation, it made me think I should have covered this, because what we're seeing here is some quite chilling propaganda. There's some strong psychology being worked on young children, and I've only given you an abbreviated kind of version of what is an 8-minute production. And interestingly, this doesn't have a lesson number. So the Become Jehovah's Friend series has lessons, and this seems to be a standalone video that hasn't been assigned a lesson number. But what we see is this narrative of, oh, well, you don't want to make Jehovah sad. Throughout history, there's been people who've made Jehovah happy and people who've made Jehovah sad. You absolutely don't want to be among those who make Jehovah sad. And there are two examples given, one of the temptation of playing violent video games, which I guess a lot of parents could argue is something that you would at least think about, you know, whether you want to expose or the extent to which you want to expose your children to violence. So there's some justification there. But when it comes to Sophia and her dilemma that she faces in the classroom, Watchtower has woven in a laudable message, which is that you shouldn't cheat in a test, you should be honest, which is a good message for children. But the real message, which is very blatant if you ask me, is that children shouldn't aspire for greatness, and they certainly shouldn't aspire for higher education, which is a repeated theme in Watchtower propaganda, not just video propaganda, but written material going back decades. Watchtower, almost from its inception, has been against university and college, and this is the real message here, because you see, for example, the image of Sophia looking at the poster of what appears to be a recruitment poster for a college or university. You also see her giving an acceptance speech, as though this would be an awful eventuality if Sophia were to end up embracing success on this level. And again, we're asked to believe that this is really all about honesty and not cheating in tests. But if you ask me, the use of music, the use of imagery, all kind of aligns to leave this very strong message on young minds that they are not to aspire to greatness. They are not to try to achieve, particularly through higher education. And that's really, I wouldn't even call it a subliminal message because it's quite blatant, but that's the message underpinning this particular video. And at the end there, you have these jubilant scenes in heaven when the correct decision is made. Again, very strong psychology, trying to manipulate young minds and make them believe that if they do what Watchtower is expecting of them, there will be this rapturous applause going on in heaven.
Please imagine that the elders decide that the outside of the Kingdom Hall needs to be painted, and that all the publishers will be given a small 2-inch paintbrush with which to paint. Now, what could happen? The publishers could get all upset concerning this request of the elders, saying, "It is ridiculous that the elders want us to paint with a small 2-inch paintbrush."
So I'm not going to go on about this too much because I already included the 2-inch paintbrush material in my all-time 10 worst JW broadcasting moments. You can check out that compilation by looking for this particular video. But I did obviously want to include it in this particular compilation because it was a 2018 video. And again, if you watch the whole thing, it's a very insidious message of control. And the whole point behind this hyperbole illustration that Stephen Lett uses is to tell witnesses that they are to comply with the elders and by extension the organization, even if they are told to do something that doesn't make sense. And as I've already argued, this sort of unquestioning compliance takes you to Jonestown if followed to its fullest extent. I mean, if you can persuade someone to paint a building with a 2-inch paintbrush, you can persuade them to drink something, can't you? So it's very disturbing rhetoric that Watchtower is coming out with, and I needed to include this in my worst 10 of 2018.
Sally's experience is one that stands out for me.
Hi.
Would you like to make a donation to the marathon?
No, thank you.
Yeah, I've been training for it, but I don't know. It hasn't. I hope I'm doing well. Yeah, no, I think so. Oh, we can put next week. Oh, I think so. Yeah.
Shall I put it in the bag, or do you want to wear it now?
No, thank you.
What's wrong, honey? You got something against them?
Well, no, I don't have anything against him personally.
So what's the problem?
I respect that they have a right to choose their lifestyle, but as a Bible reader,
Excuse me! I'm a Bible reader too. I go to church, and our church is one of the biggest supporters for this marathon. So what are you trying to say?
Displaying courage now will help me display courage in the future. Well, I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and we believe the Bible teaches sex is for a man and a woman who are married.
Intolerant people.
Wow. That sure took courage.
That's what I told her. And I asked her to think about when the political powers destroy false religion. At that time, people won't want to admit that they're religious. And so for us to admit that we're Jehovah's Witnesses then, well, that's going to require the same type of courage as she displayed at that market.
So this for me was one of the most disturbing videos to be shown to Jehovah's Witnesses at their 2018 Be Courageous convention. What you have here is a very overt narrative that people who stand up for minorities, particularly the LGBTQ minority, are angry, intolerant, unreasonable, confrontational. This is propaganda. This is portraying a demographic that Watchtower doesn't like because they have differing ideas to the faithful slaves' ideas. And rather than trying to reason on the merits of the LGBTQ position or the position of allies of gay people, instead they're just going straight for an attack on the character of these people by portraying them as, again, aggressive and confrontational. It's classic propaganda, and it serves a very homophobic narrative.
What could you do with this misshaped creation? Nothing. It is useless. At the outset, Romans 9:22 was quoted. Those who conform to Satan's system are referred to as vessels of wrath made fit for destruction.
So again, there's a little bit of crossover here between this compilation and the compilation I did for my all-time worst JW broadcasting moments. Again, this was in 2018 when you had this remarkable display of barely concealed anger and contempt by Ken Flodine, who is a governing body helper, taking out his aggression against people who don't follow his leaders, the faithful slave, in this very visual way by smashing the misshapen glass on the floor. And as I've already mentioned in previous videos, I think Ken Flodine has some real anger issues. He quite clearly cannot stand the thought of people not agreeing with his ideas, and he views them as entirely worthy of destruction. It's probably worth emphasizing this point if you happen to be watching this as someone who's never been a Jehovah's Witness, you're just interested in knowing more about the religion. If you learn about the Jehovah's Witness religion and you fail to accept it, then your fate is pretty much supposed to be the same as the fate of the glass there. That's the way the leadership of Jehovah's Witnesses looks upon you, as something that is worthy of just being smashed or destroyed.
I'd like to focus on one particular form of heat, and that is persecution. Restrictions on our work and bans are designed to create fear. Negative articles in the media about Jehovah's Witnesses are designed to create doubt. Religious leaders and opposers, they attack our neutrality, our clear support for the Bible's view of sex and marriage, or discipline by disfellowshipping and other matters. And add to that some of our brothers are being rounded up and thrown into prison. We can say that Satan has truly turned up the heat. So what will you do in the year of drought? Trust in Jehovah. You see, Satan wants to destroy our trust in Jehovah. Right from the very first with Eve. Is it really so? His whole system is built on fear, uncertainty, and doubt. The faithful and discreet slave has been selected and appointed by Jehovah, and experience has shown we can trust them. You see, trust is built by repeated good experiences. Think of all the good experiences we've had with the faithful and discreet slave and following their direction. Jehovah's direction through the faithful and discreet slave applies to all of God's people all over the earth. See, fear is really a loss of memory of what Jehovah has done for us. Satan wants us to forget all the good experiences we've had with the faithful and discreet slave, and let one moment of fear get to us and cause us to wither in the heat. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 2 says, not to be quickly shaken from your reason, nor to be alarmed, especially at rumors. Now, your trust in the faithful and discreet slave is going to be put to the test. Satan will make sure of that. It could be your own thoughts. I know better. Or maybe some twisted lies you read or hear. Either way, it's a trap. Stay away from such ideas. Trust what you know about the faithful and discreet slave. Remember, the faithful and discreet slave has been selected and appointed by Jehovah, and our experience has shown that we can trust them. As we head further into this system, as the heat from this system intensifies, remember, fear and doubt are reactions, but our decision is trust and courage.
So this was really a remarkable speech. I guess you could call it a rant by John Ekron, who is a governing body helper. He gave this speech at the 145th Gilead class graduation, and it just seems to be a circle the wagons, siege mentality speech, trying to make Jehovah's Witnesses who are listening terrified of the bogeyman outside the gates, terrified of the prospect of losing their faith in the faithful and discreet slave. And you hear repeatedly throughout his speech him refer to the faithful and discreet slave, and we must trust the faithful and discreet slave. If you're unfamiliar with Jehovah's Witness theology, the faithful and discreet slave is now just another word for the governing body. So literally the 8 guys who currently lead the Jehovah's Witness religion, that's the faithful and discreet slave. And it's like a hard sell pitch that John Eckrin is giving here, that there's never an excuse to lose your trust or faith in the faithful and discreet slave, no matter what you may hear in the media. It's interesting how he says something along the lines of negative news media is designed to make you doubt.
Negative articles in the media about Jehovah's Witnesses are designed to create doubt.
So there's no possibility of there being just, worthwhile exposure of abusive practices. There's no consideration for the fact that it could be deserved criticism of the organization. I would love to know, if John Eckrin is watching this, how he would interpret positive news media, because there is such a thing as positive media coverage of Jehovah's Witnesses, especially surrounding the convention season. You can't move for articles in local newspapers talking about how wonderful the conventions are. So I'd love to know what Satan's media is doing in those instances. But this, for me, seems to be a reaction to what is really a heightened public awareness of the abusive elements of Jehovah's Witnesses. For example, Eckrin refers to disfellowshipping and the fact that this is Jehovah's discipline.
Religious leaders and opposers, they attack our neutrality, our clear support for the Bible's view of sex and marriage, or discipline by disfellowshipping and other matters.
Well, no, you're being criticized for cruel policies that break apart families. There's no one's telling you that you can't have some kind of rule code where you don't get to be in the club if you don't conform to what the rules are decided on by the hierarchy. It's just that you don't get to tell a mother that she shouldn't speak to her son. It shouldn't apply within a family. Really, there's no excuse in his mind for anyone to have doubts or anyone to say anything negative about what the faithful slave is doing. It really carries on from the kind of barely concealed aggression that we saw in Ken Flodin smashing the glass. It's interesting that this seems to be the level of unquestioned loyalty that is required for you to rise in Watchtower's hierarchy sufficiently to become a governing body helper. And before we move on to my top three, I just want to add that in a way it's refreshing to see Watchtower ranting in this way about the persecution they are receiving at the hands of the media or at the hands of opposers, because in a way it shows that they're rattled. It shows a degree of insecurity, and it indicates that we're winning, basically, or activists like myself, advocates and abuse survivors, what we're doing collectively is making a difference. And I think Watchtower is panicking.
Doubt and fear surround me, the way ahead not clear. Lasting harm can never hold me, no prison gate or grave. Jehovah, give me eyes of faith, just let me be. Give me courage, with courage I'll endure. Jehovah, give me
we're really seeing here, same as with the 2016 bunker videos, same as with John Ekron's Year of Drought talk, we're seeing a reaction from Watchtower. We're seeing the organization feeling threatened by increasing justified and deserved exposure of its abusive practices. And rather than taking ownership of that and trying to explore ways in which the organization itself can improve and reform, it's trying to make the members themselves, the followers themselves, feel as though they are the ones being threatened, they are the ones being attacked, when in truth, it's not the individual followers who are under attack, it's the organization itself for justifiable reasons. If you cover up child sex abuse, you deserve exposure. If you persuade families to break apart for ideological reasons, you deserve exposure. If you persuade people to die rather than accept life-saving medical treatments, you deserve exposure. It's Watchtower that is the focus of scrutiny and exposure and criticism rather than individual witnesses. But very cleverly, Watchtower is trying to persuade individual witnesses that it's they who are under attack rather than the organization as a whole, for again reasons that are entirely justified.
So let's ask our final review question. How can we prepare ourselves for the events that are to come? Sarah?
We want to develop heartfelt obedience to the guidance that we receive now, so that we'll obey any future instructions Jehovah may give us. And so doing this will help us survive Armageddon.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Very nice, dear.
May I ask Brad a question?
Sure. Go ahead.
Brad, I notice you've really been focused on that picture. Do you mind if I ask what you're thinking about?
Well, will the brothers tell us how to fight the people who will be attacking us?
We won't need to do any fighting.
Now what will we need the instructions for? Are we just gonna stand there and do nothing?
We don't know what those instructions will be, son.
Brad, when Armageddon comes, we'll have nothing to worry about. And we won't have to fight. We know that because of what Jehovah has done for his people in the past. Jehoshaphat gathered Judah at the temple and began to inquire of Jehovah. And Jehovah caused a Levite named Jehaziel to give an answer that gave everyone courage.
What did he say?
Do not be afraid or be terrified because of this large crowd. For the battle is not yours, but God's. You will not need to fight this battle. Take your position, stand still, and see the salvation of Jehovah in your behalf. Jehovah turned the enemies against each other. By the time the Israelites arrived, not one soldier was left. It was obvious that Brad's courage was strengthened after reviewing this Bible account. And I'm happy to say that after our discussions, the friends in our group are more aware of how their own acts of courage now will help them be courageous in the future.
So I actually discussed this video toward the beginning of 2018 because it was among a batch of leaked videos leaked out of the organization well before the convention series began. And I was disturbed then by the video, even though I couldn't see all elements of the video, because as you can see there's quite a bit of green screen technology used. And in the parts that I was commenting on, you can see my comments in this video here. I was really kind of commenting just on the narrative of Brad and the fact that he was being portrayed as being concerned about whether he would receive instructions on how to fight during Armageddon. And I commented that this is unrealistic because most children, if they're traumatized by an image of Armageddon, it's not because they're wondering how they get to fight. It's because they're alarmed at the fact that probably their school friends, or basically anyone they know who isn't a Jehovah's Witness, can expect to be slaughtered at any moment. This seems to me to be a more realistic thing that would be going through Brad's mind. But it's only when you see the finished video with the green screen elements fully rendered that you see the true horror of this video. Bearing in mind that this video is or was shown at large gatherings, at large conventions, including many thousands of children in the audience. Bearing in mind this was compulsory viewing for families. It's not the sort of thing where a Jehovah's Witness parent gets to opt in to which videos they want their child to sit through. It's just expected, if you are a parent attending the convention, that, well, your children are going to sit through all of it. And this is the sort of material that Jehovah's Witness children are expected to sit through, where you literally have Israelites stepping past bodies of slaughtered opponents of Jehovah to the point where this vista opens up of these fields of bodies. And this is the sort of thing that we can expect at Armageddon, being portrayed in a HD video at a convention, again attended by thousands of children. But you can see why it's made it so high up in my list. It's one thing for the likes of the governing body to harbour these grisly visions of slaughter and gore and destruction in their own warped minds, but to be thrusting this gruesome vision on children is, in my view, inexcusable. But now it's time to unveil the #1 slot in my 10 worst Jehovah's Witness videos of 2018.
The apostates and our enemies accuse us of being a cult. I hate that when they address that with us, but they throw this out there. I've been all over the world, and here I am now in the auditorium here in Trinidad. I haven't seen anybody dragged in here with a chain. You have same-sex marriage. See, all these different ones that want to choose this other immoral lifestyle, and how dare you say anything about it, you judgmental individual. Who do you think you are? I was born this way. Things like that. Stop and think about the war of the great day of Jehovah the Almighty. You go to a supermarket, place where you're shopping for food, and look around. See, how many of them are going to make it? Jeremiah foretold, and here's what he said. Jehovah inspired him. Those slain by Jehovah will certainly come to be in that day from one end of the earth clear to the other end of the earth. So here in Trinidad, Tobago, Guyana, there will be dead people everywhere. Oh yeah. It's going to shake you up. So that you understand, if you want to argue with God, go ahead. You're going to lose.
So hopefully you can understand why I've chosen this shocking speech by Tony Morris that was delivered in Trinidad during a branch visit toward the beginning of 2018. Hopefully it doesn't require too much justification as to why I've chosen it in the #1 slot. I'm going to show you a little bit more of it shortly, but two things to talk about right off the bat. You'll see Tony Morris there commenting on the fact that he can't stand the fact that Jehovah's Witnesses are referred to as a cult, and his argument against that word being used is, oh, well, we don't chain people. People aren't dragged to assemblies and conventions and meetings with chains. Therefore, you can't accuse us of being a cult. But anyone who knows anything about Jehovah's Witnesses understands that that is an entirely ludicrous claim, because the truth is there are chains. They may not be visible, they may be mental and emotional, but Jehovah's Witnesses are very much chained to their organization. It is a captive organization, because you are threatened with one of the worst punishments imaginable, namely family estrangement, if you ever dare to change your mind, to stop believing in Tony and his fellow members of the faithful slave. That's the chain that keeps Jehovah's Witnesses in servitude, and that's why it can very reasonably be said that Jehovah's Witnesses are indeed a damaging cult. And that's before we even talk about the morbid fear of annihilation at Armageddon that Jehovah's Witnesses are indoctrinated with from childhood, as perfectly demonstrated by the last video I've shown you. And what we're seeing here in what is again essentially a rant by a Watchtower official, in this case a governing body member, what we're seeing here is a demonstration of where this warped thinking comes from. It is from the twisted minds of Tony Morris and his friends and the governing body helpers who serve them that we get this ridiculous but very pernicious and pervasive idea that if you don't agree with Jehovah's Witnesses, you are deserving of being slaughtered. And the image we got there is, just take a look around you at the supermarket. All of these people are going to be dead when Armageddon comes if they don't change their ways, if they don't become Jehovah's Witnesses. This, bottom line, is what the Jehovah's Witness religion is all about: followers or die.
Young men, they're wearing these tight suits. The suit jacket's tight, and then the pants are tight all the way down. I'm a big guy. And some say, well, you wouldn't look good in one anyway. That's why you don't want one, you know? Sorry, buddy. I would never disrespect my Heavenly Father and dress like that. No. And with sisters, we don't want you to walk into an assembly hall or a kingdom hall, and you walk in, and because your clothing is revealing, the brothers go, whoop, I got to look away. That's disrespectful. What's that all about? And sometimes the dresses are so tight, and they're thinking, yeah, but with a figure like this, no. The world thinks that way, not Jehovah's people. It's disrespectful. Some can't do maybe as much as others, but we have, as Christians, the God-given responsibility to warn others. So you just take a look, and this is the idea Jehovah's getting across at your hands. And you look at your hands now, only God, as he looks at your hands in here and all those that are tied in, does he see blood there? The humans sitting next to you, they might have an idea because they know you well and you haven't been out in service in weeks. Well, guess what? Most likely God's seeing some blood all over your hands. Or they go totally inactive, and we appeal to them, we try to help, but you cannot water down what God says here. If your hands are not clean because you've been out warning, then they have blood on them, and you're going to lose your life. It's what it is. It's a reality.
So yes, what a remarkable display of arrogance, of delusion, of ignorance, of fear-mongering. You have there Tony Morris saying that it's not just enough to be a Jehovah's Witness when Armageddon comes if you want to survive. You need to be a Jehovah's Witness who is doing their very best to warn people by engaging fully in the preaching work, because if you're not engaging fully enough in the preaching work, then you are blood guilty due to all the people you haven't saved, and you too will be liable for destruction at Armageddon. One of the most common objections that I receive from Jehovah's Witnesses is them saying, oh, you're lying when you say that we believe that only Jehovah's Witnesses will survive Armageddon. That's not what we think at all. Jehovah's going to make the decision. It's all in his hands. And who knows who's going to make it when Armageddon comes. And yet you have there very clearly a governing body member saying, well, not only is it just Jehovah's Witnesses who will survive, but even some Jehovah's Witnesses will be killed because they're not sufficiently engaging in the warning work. Can there be a more blatant example of just how much of a doomsday cult this religion is? And then you have also in these clips, you have that remarkable rant about tight pants. And as I've already mentioned on my channel, this is a bugbear of Tony Morris that he's had for years now, in fact. What really is quite chilling when you think about it is that there are lots of things that Tony Morris and the rest of the governing body members need to be devoting their attention to, including very serious evidence of widespread cover-up of abuse by their organisation under their watch, including policies that they continue to perpetuate that serve to help pedophiles stay undetected and unpunished. They have such pressing issues to be giving their attention to, and yet what he's really concerned about is the tightness of people's trousers. Could there possibly be stronger evidence that the governing body's priorities are hopelessly out of alignment with reality? The organisation desperately needs to start taking seriously the abuse that's going on, the abuse that's being covered up, the families that are being torn apart, the people who are frankly dying due to the blood teaching, rather than fixating over what people wear and whether they are dressing modestly or not. So anyway, those were my 10 worst Jehovah's Witness videos of 2018. Hopefully you can understand why I included them all. I'm not 100% about the order that I put them in, but hopefully taken as a whole you can understand why I chose this material. It really does demonstrate how controlling this religion has become, how much fear-mongering there is, how much paranoia there is. This is not an organisation that has anything really positive and uplifting to bring to the table. Bottom line, its message and its narrative is one of fear, is one of control, is one of making you doubt the outside world, making you think that Satan's world is out to get you, and that everyone outside of your bubble, everyone who doesn't share your beliefs, is worthy of death. And that kind of thinking, quite frankly, I am more than happy to have long left behind me. But I hope you have enjoyed these videos. Please don't forget to subscribe to the John Cedars channel for more such videos going into 2019. And as always, thank you for watching.